Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this week's video. This week I'm talking about executive functioning and how difficulties in that area can have implications on children and adults with autism and ADHD. Basically, executive functioning is described as a set of skills that have to do with an individual's cognitive function. So basically, is how they think, it's their emotions, it's all to do with their problem solving, obviously their paying attention, concentration, their memory, their flexibility. And it has been suggested that over 80% of children and adults have executive functioning problems. And I know personally myself, obviously, I'm in a family where, autism and ADHD is quite prevalent. And I would say executive functioning is probably up there with one of the biggest difficulties that we have, because it's things like, it's daily living, concentration and attention, listening when you're at school, when you're at work, and managing time. That's another one. Completing tasks, which is quite difficult, especially when, for example, if you're a child and you're in a busy classroom, and you've got a lot of sensory difficulties going on, and obviously your anxiety, that can also affect executive functioning. So it's like looking out for that. And if you're having flexibility of thought, then everything has a knock-on effect. And then sometimes it almost seems that daily living tasks and school activities and work tasks, they kind of sometimes it seems like it's impossible to get through, and quite often I know that individuals with autism, they kind of, once they've started a task, it's important for them to finish it and complete it. And I know personally myself that that's how I feel. When I start something, I need to finish it. And I know with one of my children, one of my daughters, she's exactly the same. But then because we have executive functioning difficulties, if we have difficulty completing the task, that will increase our anxiety. It'll have a knock-on effect, therefore, it can kind of set you off for the day. And in terms of children, that can obviously make their school day pretty, difficult for them. It also has implications on our memory. A lot of children and adults with autism can have fantastic long-term memory and remember lots and lots of information and facts, and they can give you they have a vast vocabulary, and they can tell you about anything. For some children and adults can be like that. However, short-term memory is where we kind of have a problem. And that's all to do with executive functioning, because what happens is basically, everyday living where you have to remember, pay bills, you need to get dressed. So in terms of our children, get dressed, and just basically everything that we do during the day. And if we're given an instruction, quite often our short-term memory is, kind of affected by executive functioning, so we tend to forget. And it's almost like we're not listening, but actually it's just we can't process any more information. And it's all to do with how we regulate our emotions and how we regulate our sensory difficulties, problem solving. It's quite, sometimes if we've got all of the sensory stuff going on and all of the anxiety going on, and obviously everything that we have to do during the day, like the tasks that we have to complete, quite often that will affect our problem solving and our thought processes. Can we make the right decisions? And it's it's like with children, don't give them too much choice. They've already got quite a lot going on up there. That they don't need that choice, because it just that can lead to a meltdown. And like I say, if you look at children with ADHD too, quite often the ADD element, the attention deficit part, and obviously with autism too, children have listening, attention, concentration difficulties. Again, all to do with executive functioning. And if you read up on ADHD, that is the big executive functioning is a massive chunk of that condition. and a lot of people can seem untidy, messy, unorganized. You can have the most clean home. I'm quite OCD in terms of how clean I am, but I can be really unmessy. And it's quite embarrassing, I suppose, and I don't mean to be messy. I'm not messy in every area of my life, but, things like, handbags are messy. I don't always think about when I'm getting dressed. I kind of rush it, and I can seem quite messy in how I look. Probably not how I look now, but, with my buttons and things like that. And it's just, it's, also, it can be like in the workplace, school, and be messy in those areas as well. And it's just down to that executive functioning. You may find it difficult as well to achieve everyday living skills. That can be, like I said, a school, home, self-care, and quite often just things fail to get completed. Adults, I would say, is disorganisation, may find it difficult to pay bills. That's quite often happens in adults that have the ADHD as well. Forget appointments. With me, I have to write everything down, and I have to have the letters there, and I have to have all the appointments, my diary, because if it's not visually there, I find it quite difficult to remember. And it's with the amount of appointments that myself and my children have, it's important that I do remember them. Things like misplacing letters, important information, because obviously it's a short-term memory element, and it's trying to prioritize things as well. We have that difficulty. For me, when I get up on a morning, I tend to have quite rigid and I like a routine. So I really do try to prioritize, the important stuff that I need to do, like the appointments and things, and that's quite exhausting for adults with autism and ADHD. Implications of poor executive functioning. A child may have difficulty perceiving emotion. They may find it difficult to maintain friendships and make friends. They may have trouble sharing, taking turns, controlling their emotions, accepting other people's viewpoints, and even us adults. I'm not going to lie, that's probably one of my big ones. Is trying to accept that other people have an opinion, and trying to, improve with that. Now I know a bit more about myself, and especially, like, people find it difficult to maintain friendships, especially if they have, like, sequencing difficulties. They may find it difficult to follow instruction and communicate effectively. So children at school, they might find it difficult to tell you what happened when they got home from school, because, there's been that much going on. It's quite difficult to remember the sequence of actually what has happened. So quite often for me, when my children get home, I don't put any pressure on them for them to tell me, what's happened during the day, because quite often they get home, they're exhausted, they need time to regulate the sensory, regulate their emotions, just regulate everything. So I don't put pressure on them by asking them what they've done, and I'll let them do it in their own time. Well, more my eldest, like I say. And as well, sequencing difficulties would also be apparent in language as well. So quite often, even children that are verbal, if they're quite anxious, you'll find that obviously at school it can get quite anxious, and as the day goes on, it's like that Coke bottle effect. So you might find that sometimes the language can kind of seem all jumbled up, and that's even the children that are very verbal. And I've come across that quite often. It's kind of they're not really making sense, because it's all that information from during the day that they have to process. But definitely, executive functioning is definitely one that I would say that children and adults with autism and ADHD struggle with massively. And if I could take that bit away, I would, if I'm being honest, because it can cause a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. It can mess with your emotions, and it's not nice, especially for our kids. Thank you.